Okay, so what's special about this tutorial is we're simulating instances using cloth simulations, and we're outputting some attributes based on the proximity to control some features in cloth simulation, like the pinning of the vertices and stuff like that. So let's get started. So as always, I'm going to start off by deleting everything in my scene, and I'm just going to make a space here. Then I'm going to add a cylinder here. Open up this menu, and I'm gonna bring up the depth just like that. Bring it up to something like 15 and turn the radius down a little bit, and that will be okay. Now I'm gonna hit tab to give there some loop cuts because we're gonna be adding a subdivision later, so we don't get problems there. Let's select that object and rename it to simulation. Then click that button, hit G for the geometry nodes, hit N, and I'm going to create a new geometry nodes tree here, and this is going to be our instancing. Then right here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a cylinder, another one, and let's add a join geometry to preview both of those. And I'm going to connect the mesh to the join geometry right here. Now we want to mesh it a little bit, so the vertices can be 5 or something, and the depth, bring it up just like that. We may need to change these a little bit later, but right now this is okay. I'm gonna bring down the radius just like that, and I think this will be fine. Or this. Yeah, that's okay. Now let's add some side segments right here so that we can instance stuff on there. So make it 15. That's okay. I'm gonna save the file. Cloth simulation. Enter. Now right here, let's instance some cubes. I'm gonna add an instance on points node, and in the instance I'm gonna add cube. Now, in terms of simulating faster, the cubes are the best. Like, they simulate very faster than iospheres and UV spheres. So I like to use cubes here. Then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add a subdivisional surface node right here and set it to 2. And that's okay for now. Then let's just bring these nodes back a little bit. Let's just bring that radius down a little bit so that they touch here. I'm gonna hide this cube so it's minimized a little bit, and I'm going to add a proximity node, a geometry proximity, and connect the group input to the target right here. Then in the distance, I'm going to add a map range and connect this map range right here. Now what we want to do is we want to pin these areas of all the spheres so that they don't fall down while the cloth is simulating, because we need a pin group for the cloth simulation. So we're converting this float value that the proximity is giving us to a pin group. Let's just do it. It will make sense in a second. I'm going to add a set material node after the join geometry so that we can preview our map range. Now in the material, I'm going to add my material here and go to the shader editor. Now click the material, and right here I'm going to add an attribute node. Now if you go to the modifiers and in the output attributes, there is a result value here. I'm going to go to the geometry nodes and get this and connect it right here. I'm going to click on the group output and go to the group, and I'm going to select the second one and rename it to the preview, because we just want to preview our float value right here. So just like that, in the preview, I'm gonna type in any letter that I want. I'm gonna type in a T here and click on this button. I'm gonna go to the shader editor and type in T right here too. Control Shift click on that and preview that. Go to the shading. Now it's all black right now. I'm gonna go to geometry nodes and add a node called realize instances. Now you can see the proximity is kind of working, but we gotta manipulate the value a little bit more to make it work. So let's set the map range to stepped linear, and the steps can be 10 or something. Yeah, this is good. Then I'm gonna play with these values a little bit. So if something is white in the viewport, it means that these areas are gonna be pinned and they will not move in the cloth simulation. They will stay in their place. So you can see this is black. It means that this area will move. So what we want to do is we want to make this area white because we don't want to move it. We don't want to make our spheres fall down. So let's do this. Let's invert these values. Just a little bit more, and this is perfect. Then this is working. I'm gonna go to my vertex groups, and in there I'm gonna create a new vertex group, and this group is gonna be called the pinning. Now right here in the modifier, I'm gonna click on this button and select my pinning here. Now what are we doing here? We have this float value. The white area means that these vertices are selected. So we're transferring this data to our vertex group, and we're using this vertex group later in our cloth simulation for the pinning. So I'm gonna add a set shade smooth node here to smooth things out, just like that. Now this is working. Let's control the scale a little bit. So for the scale, I'm gonna add a random value node to randomize it a little bit and connect it to the scale. Now keep in mind that if the objects get very tiny, like this one or this one, your simulation is gonna take forever to bake. Don't make this mistake and keep the minimum scale to something like 0.5, and the maximum can be something like 1.5, or I can maybe bring up the minimum to something like 0.6 and bring down the maximum to 1.3 or 4. Now we want to control like an inflating kind of thing. So for that we need a little bit of proximity here. I'm gonna pin this and add in a circle here. And circle is our best choice because circles don't appear in the render because they have no faces. Now right here I'm gonna rename this Bezier circle to my controller. This is working, and I'm gonna import it to the geometry nodes. I'm gonna set it to relative, and in the geometry I'm gonna add a proximity node. Now we wanna go with the vertices because we don't have any faces, so set this to points, and in the distance I'm gonna add a map range. Now connect this map range directly to the scale. Now we can't see anything right now because I forgot I added a curved circle instead of a mesh circle. So I'm gonna hit Ctrl A and visual geometry to mesh, so it's a mesh now. Now we can see geometry here. Now let's invert these values a little bit and play with them so that I'm gonna go with something like that. Yeah, this looks good. Now in the to maximum value, I'm gonna bring it up. Or what I can do is I can add a random value here too to just get some randomness, you know. The first one is gonna be 2 and the second one is gonna be 4 or something. This is way too big, so I'm gonna bring the first one to 1 and the second one to something like 3 or 2.5. Now let's pin this and click our controller and bring this down. It works. Now we have nothing appearing here, so I'm gonna bring up the to minimum value, or I can get my random value here and connect it to the to minimum. So this is normal now. Now you may think that this is working, but this is not the whole thing because everything is just intersecting. I'm gonna bring this up to 3, I think. Yeah, this is cool. Now I think our geometry nodes tree is ready. And now next thing we want to do is the simulation. So let's go to the timeline, and I'm gonna set my end frame to 120, and right here in the simulation tab I'm gonna select that and I'm gonna click cloth. So we want to go for something like silk, and the vertex mass, let's make it 3 kg. Turn on the pressure, and the pressure can be something like 50 or 60. I'm gonna go with 60. Then let's go to the cache, and I'm gonna set the end frame to 120, and then I'm gonna go to the shape, and right here we got the pinning. So select that group and turn on dynamic mesh because this option is very important here. And in the collisions I'm gonna turn on self collisions. In the distance, let's make it something like 0.003. That should be fine. And yeah, we don't need to do anything else. Let's make the collision quality to something like 4, and the speed multiplier, let's make it something like 0.4 because you don't want to make things very fast. A little bit slow will look fine. Now let's do our first bake and let's see what we got. Oh, everything is just popping out, which is not a good thing, so our pressure can be too high. Let's make it something like 10. Next thing I want to do is I'm going to select the controller here, bring it all the way up and insert a location keyframe. Then go to the last frame and bring it all the way down and insert a location keyframe again, so that we get some animation here, and bake again. This is way faster. I don't know what will happen. Let's see what happens. Oh, not looking very good. Oh yeah, so because this is silk, it's very light, I think. I'm gonna set this pressure up to 30, and then I'm gonna go right here and let's make it something like cotton. and the mass can be, let's leave it like that. I'm gonna make it 2 kg or something. Let's bake again. You have to try many settings for that to work. But the simulation is working, right? So we can change settings and this will be fine. Well, let's see that. Well, that's not bad. You can see that some of the small ones don't have a white spot like this one on them. We want to make sure that all of them have some pinning, like some proximity. If they're not coming in the proximity, they will fall down, and the simulation is not gonna look good then. Let's bring this minimum value up a little bit. I'm gonna bring the radius of it a little bit down. Now go to the shading preview node. This should be working, and I think we should set the pressure up to something like 50. Let's bring the quality steps up to 10, but it's gonna take double time to process, so I'm gonna bake again. Oh yeah, I think we're successful. The simulation is working. Now let's do some shading. For the shading, what I want to do is I want to do lighting a little bit, because without lighting, shading is nothing. So I'm going to select cycles, GPU compute, and the maximum samples can be 128 for my render. Turn on motion blur of 0.35. Color management, set this to high contrast. Film transparent, render region 30 fps, RGB 0. I'm gonna go to the world tab and see what's there. Let's change this from color to sky texture, and I'm gonna go to the shading tab to preview my principled BSDF, just like that. And in here I'm going to go to the render properties, and in the color management, let's bring the exposure down. We can add a subdivision surface to make it smoother. You can leave it on 2 for the render and 1 for the viewport. Subsurface, let's give it 0.3. If your computer cannot handle this, you don't need to do that. I'm going to choose my color, the favorite orange color, Ctrl C and Ctrl V here, paste the colors. So this was it for that. You can give another material to the bar thing. I'm going to give it 0 roughness, high specularity, and this is it. I'm going to go to geometry nodes and select my geometry nodes. Now remove this material right there and give another one. Create another material. This can be our metal. If you don't want to do this part, this is not important. Go to the shading and give it metal. This can be a little bit metallic, just like that. And there we go. We've done it. Oh, it's super fast. Even the viewport, it's like 30 fps. You can apply this method on pretty much everything. You just need to pin the vertices and give it some pressure and scale for the instances, and this just works. So if you're still here, I want to share another thing with you which was in the intro of the video and is also quite interesting on the same topic, so let's do it too. And so what I want to do here is, well, let's just delete this everything from there, and I'm going to add a cube. And I told you cubes are really great with simulations because the topology after the subdivision is very great. I'm gonna scale that up a little bit, apply the scale, and hit Ctrl 3 for some subdivisions. Then I'm gonna apply this modifier and create a new geometry nodes. Oh, this is shading. Create a new geometry nodes 3 and set it to inflate or something. So right here, let's add a subdivision surface, and this one is really simple. Let's create a vertex group like the other one, name it to pinning. This one is a little bit different, right? So let's add a Voronoi texture here and set this to distance to edge. Now I'm gonna connect 2 of these right here, one for the preview and one for the group. So in the output, the second one, I'm gonna enter any letter like L or something. Go to I'm gonna add a set material node here, create another material for that, whatever material you want, and select it. Go to the shading tab, add an attribute to preview our attribute. This is gonna be the L, and Control Shift click, go to the shading. Now we got this from our geometry nodes, right? So bring the scale down to something like 0.8. This is working. Now you can see we want to pin these things, and these will pop out. So the area that we want to pin needs to be white, like white is equal to 1 and the 1 is pinned and the 0 will be not pinned. So let's play with these values. I'm gonna set this 0 to 1 and 1 to 0, and then let's play with it. I don't know, let's just try different things here. Maybe I can add a color ramp here too. Yeah, I think we need some subdivisions, right? So bring that up a little bit, and this looks good. I'm gonna bring the scale down, or I think this scale will do it, not sure. Now right here in the first distance, let's get our pinning group, select it, and go to the physics tab, select the cloth, go to the first frame, and right here let's make it silk, and in there the end frame is gonna be 120, whatever frame you want. Dynamic mesh, this is self collisions turned on. We don't need collisions that much here, but I'm just turning it on. We need pressure obviously. L for the timeline, and let's play with the pressure a little bit. So I'm gonna give it a pressure of 300, and let's see how is that working. So play it. Oh shit. Let's give it a pressure of something like 100. Go back and see how that's working. Oh, it's still not. We didn't add the pin group here, the pinning. Now that should be working. Let's play it. Oh yeah, this is working. Looks cool to me. Let's go to geometry nodes and change that up a little bit, because not looking very good. I'm gonna bring that back just like that, or remove the color ramp, we don't need it. Go to the timeline again, and let's process the data here. On the first frame, what I want is, I want a pressure of something like 30 here, and insert a keyframe. Now on the right here on the 5th frame, I want a pressure of 50. And on the 15th frame, I want a pressure of something like, I think 200 will go, and insert a keyframe. Then I'm gonna go to the frame 20 and add a pressure of 30 again, and insert a keyframe. So let's duplicate all these keyframes now, just like that, and hit Shift R to repeat the action. Now I'm gonna set the end frame to something like 130 because it fits well here, and the simulation ending to 132. Now let's Ctrl S to save the file and bake it again. And yeah, if you create something cool, I'll be happy to see it and share it. Now let's play this and see what we got. Oh man, this looks good, but I think we can improve this. This is not what's... Let's delete the bake, and pressure is a lot now and the vertices are less. So when we have more vertices in an object, actually their weight is a lot. So I think I can multiply this by 2, then we can get somewhere. I'm gonna multiply it by 2. So now let's bake again. I think this is working now. So if your bake is stuck, you need to just hit escape button and turn it off, because this is never gonna complete, because the object is overscaled or something at that point. Let's see how... oh yeah, this is what I was talking about. So maybe what I can do is just bring that up again and go to the timeline and delete the bake. Now right here, what I want to do is go to geometry nodes. Let's just add a math node here and multiply this by 1. Clamp it, or 1 point something. So this ensures that we're getting a value more than 1. Like, I think here the values are a little bit kind of weak. That's why the whole thing is a little bit popping up. I want these white areas to stay at its place. So let's bake again. The process was easy, but the whole baking thing is just so boring. I was doing it all day. But the fun thing about this is, when you're baking, you can just sit there and watch stuff and movies, and at that point, because it takes a lot of time to bake sometimes when you're baking in high resolution, but I prefer low resolution baking because this is just a trial, you're not rendering it, right? This is actually better than the first one, right? Yeah, it looks good. We can make it better, I think. I'm gonna multiply it by 2. Let's see what happens, and let's bake again. let's see what that's doing. Oh yeah, it's actually trapped now. It looks very good. I'm gonna set shade smooth, and yeah, this is good. Let's go to the material and give it that simple material that we are going. So let's connect that right here to the surface. Bring the transmission up, bring the transmission roughness up, get that attribute, and I'm gonna connect it to the color. Add a color ramp here, and go to the rendered view to see what happens. I'm gonna add an HDR this time, because I think this looks better with it. I think this one would go. Let's add an icosphere, scale it down a little bit, create a new material, remove the BSDF and principal BSDF and add an emission, bring up the strength to something like 5, and in here let's flip the color ramp. Now in the white value I'm gonna make it something like that or that. This looks good. Now that we're using the HDR, so we need to bring the exposure back to normal. This looks very good. This was it for today. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you want to support this channel you can join my Patreon and get all of my project files including this one, and I'll see you in my next tutorial.